Just when you think the Mets are building momentum after their sweep against the Phillies at home, they get swept at home against the Blue Jays. Why can't this team go on that run that we've been waiting for all season? I'll discuss that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter, Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnMLB today to get 10% off your first month. Now, this was a brutal series over the weekend as the Mets just got beat bad by the Blue Jays. And it is made more frustrating when you take stock on where things were the last time I hit record for an episode of Locked On Mets on Thursday night, coming off a sweep where they beat the Phillies, and it was like, all right, just go out this weekend, win a series against the Blue Jays, and then you have a day off, and then you go to war with the Braves, right? You're going to face the Braves to start the week in Atlanta. This is an opportunity where the Mets were, 3.5 out, and maybe you pick up a game over the weekend, and you go into that series and you try to do damage against the Braves. Well, the Braves, they end up gaining a couple games here because they went into a tough environment, Arizona, a team that's been great this year, and they took 2 or 3 in the final 2 games of that series. The Mets, they get swept, and so now they're 5.5 out heading into this series against the Braves. They could sweep the Braves and still be 2.5 games out in this division, and it's why at times I have said this year, I don't know if the division is in the cards for the Mets this year, if they could really compete with that Braves team, and we'll get more into that series tomorrow, but it's moments like this where the Mets just seem to come up short, and it's really across all phases this weekend. Starting pitching, first 2 games, really solid. Okay, Justin Verlander was great on Friday night. Only gave up a run. It's just that Chris Bassett was better on the Blue Jays end. Saturday, Tyler McGill was really good as well, but not good enough because the Mets needed shutouts to win games in the first couple. They just did nothing offensively, and they literally got shut out in the first game. They only scored 1 run on Saturday. So 18 innings of baseball, you scratch 1 run across, you don't deserve to win, obviously. And then they finally score on Sunday, but Kodai Senga doesn't pitch well. It was the first time we saw him on regular rest. He's always got an extra day. That is something that you have to be worried about with a pitcher coming over from the NPB. They throw once a week over there. So they come over here and you wonder, okay, how is he going to handle it? Here's an opportunity to pitch on 4 days rest like everybody else, and he doesn't make it out of the 3rd inning. So again, every single phase dropped the ball this weekend. The lineup, the first 2 games, dropped the ball. Starting pitching, the 3rd game, dropped the ball. And even though the lineup was better with 4 home runs, they were all solo shots. 2 from Tommy Pham on Sunday, 1 from Pete Alonso. Congratulations to him. He now owns the Citi Field record for most home runs ever hit in that ballpark, which is really impressive. And then, of course, you got Starling Marte homer. But again, it was 4 runs, and the Blue Jays were able to get 4 on Senga, and they got a couple late, and it's just every single phase you can look at. You can even say the bullpen, like the bullpen gave up a couple runs today when the Mets finally got back in it and tied it up. You have Leon out there pitching, which I don't know if we can criticize it too much because the Mets are just trying to get by, and they used everybody the previous night, but he's out there and he gives up the 2 runs, and Oh, that was a missed opportunity. And then you have David Robertson give up a run on Saturday in the ninth inning, where I think you can make an argument that the Mets made a mistake pitching to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. They had a base open that they could have put him on. They should have put him on. But when they only score one run, they didn't score in the ninth inning. How do you just, put that on Buck Showalter, or put that on, Robertson for not just, pitching more carefully around him? I mean, it was even a pretty decent pitch that, Guerrero dug out to get the hit. So again, it was across the board failure from this team. And to fall right back to 500, now you got to play the Braves. You go and you lose that series. Now you're below 500 again. And all that kind of positive momentum that you had building, it dissipates. And I still believe in the long run, this team's going to be fine. I still think that this rotation is going to be, good enough. And I think this lineup is only going to get better. But to not get a single game this weekend, to let the Blue Jays come in and punch you in the mouth like that, granted, I pointed out on the preview that, outside of playing the AL East, the Blue Jays have been awesome this year. So they were 12 games over. Now they're 15 over against teams that aren't in the AL East. So it was a very good baseball team, but you got to find a way to do more. And to have it start with Chris Bassett going and pitching into the eighth inning, 1 out away from finishing off the eighth, 3 hits, no walks, 8 strikeouts, just killed the Mets. And then to have it close out where Senga, who is the Bassett replacement, pitches so poorly. It's just a weekend of Mets baseball that I think we'd all like to forget. Luckily, they have a day off to try to regroup before they go up against the Braves. But that's just taking a team that was riding so high off that sweep against the Phillies. We're like, yeah, the Mets aren't in the same league as the Phillies right now. The Phillies are this team that can't figure it out. And then here the Mets are. They got great starting pitching in each of those games, and it's going to carry over this weekend. You still have a series where you're going to have Verlander and Senga bookend it, so you feel really good about the pitching you had going in. And it just felt like a series the Mets were going to win on the outset of it, where they would get game 1 with Verlander and they'd find a way to get one of the other two, and you would take that momentum and carry it over and then play the Braves and do some damage there. Now you got to go into Atlanta reeling, which is not where you want it to be. Luckily, it's a long season. There's still 100+ games left. Mets sitting at 30-30. You still got time, but just it was rough. It was rough, that's for sure. I want to turn the page, though, and talk about Tomas Nido, because it seems like he's on his way out. So we're going to do that in a minute. And I just want to kind of regroup into what this team can become here over the final 100 games of the season. So we're going to get to all that in just a minute. But before we do, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit in just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you can be sure that every part of your ride fits right the first time around. Just add it to My Garage. Look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. With Omar Narvaez set to return to the New York Mets, it appears like Tomas Nido is heading out. He put a post on Instagram, I believe, with a peace sign. Seems like he's saying goodbye, as he'll likely be designated for assignment here. They don't have any options on Nido, so all they could do is designate him and see if he passes through waivers. If he did, I'm sure that they'd love to keep Tomas Nido, but I imagine that as a valuable backup catcher, we could see him even traded. Honestly, we could see someone put a claim in, or he could just decide to be a free agent and sign somewhere if he clears waivers too. He doesn't have to accept an assignment back to Syracuse for the Mets. So seems like he'll be heading on somewhere else, and that now gives you some clarity on what the Mets are going to roll with moving forward here, with Narvaez and Alvarez as the backstop, and that's a credit to Francisco Alvarez for winning the job. And Narvaez was brought in to be the starter and to be that bridge to Alvarez. And it was his injury that opened the opportunity for him to grab that job. I think he's still going to play pretty much as he's been playing, maybe a tad less. Narvaez as a left-handed bat is an ideal complement to Alvarez. And the funny thing is that Alvarez actually been hitting better against righties and lefties, but I would imagine that he's going to be in there anytime a lefty's on the mound, and he's going to start a lot of times other than that as well. You might see one less start a week with Narvaez compared to Nido, a little more of an accomplished hitter. And I will say too, it depends on how you want to use them, because it's always tough to use your backup catcher, for substitutions. But Narvaez as a lefty bat does give Buck Showalter another wrinkle off that bench as well. And then, now we sort of know that you're not going to see Daniel Vogelback moved anytime soon, at least in the distant future. There's a chance, but right now, I think he's kind of set, and he's going to be sticking around. Tommy Pham, of course, is going to stay. He's had a 2 home run game, although I will say pretty brutal. That one play today where you have Alvarez try to backpick a guy at second base on a walk. Granted, he might be a little bit overeager to be throwing the ball around. I will say that is a criticism you could make of Francisco Alvarez, and it was a bad throw. It was his mistake initially, but Tommy Pham didn't hustle. Tommy Pham just kind of walked gingerly in to get that ball in a light jog, and then finally picked it up at the last second. And Matt Chapman was able to go from diving back into second base to coming all the way around to score. And that run definitely haunted the Mets. Now, granted, I think it was the next half inning, Tommy Pham got it back with a home run, and then he hit another home run later. And look, I broke down the numbers on him last week a little bit there. Pham has been hitting really well lately. The kind of metrics behind what he's been doing with how hard he hits the baseball, it does kind of promise for these types of games. And on ISO, he's going to hit 2 home runs every game, but that he's going to be able to leave the yard and be an impact bat for the Mets. So I'm not saying that, that one bad play is something that should cost his roster spot. I'm sure there's some Mets fans that had that reaction, but look, he homers a couple times, and I'm sure that erased it for a lot of you. The Mets are in a weird spot with the construction of this team. They have 2 guys in Canna and Pham that have similar skill sets as right-handed corner outfielders. You have Starling Marte, who is he breaking out? You feel like it, but then the OPS is still under 700 because he's not drawing his walks and getting on base at a good clip, which we don't really expect from him. But you expect him to hit better than 250 also. So you have that. You have the fact that until today we hit the home run, he hasn't been slugging much, and so you just have an interesting composition of this roster with these corner outfielders not really getting any good production from Marte, having 2 guys that are giving you decent production, but it feels like they're struggling to find and play the hot hand at times between Pham and Canna. In some respects, it feels like Buck Showalter doesn't have a good finger on the pulse of this team. But I don't necessarily think that that's a Buck problem as much as it's just when the players aren't performing, it makes the manager look bad. So we'll see. I think Narvaez coming back does help a little bit. Get another veteran in the mix that, can maybe, certainly could do more than what Nido had been providing offensively in the days that Alvarez isn't starting. He is the clear mentor for Alvarez, both Venezuelan catchers. And we'll see if that helps a little bit here, but it's not Narvaez is coming back to save your season by any stretch. The problem, as it has been all year, it's not about the rookies. Okay. It's not about the just Daniel Vogelback or Mark Fantos in the DH position, even though that's the place where you can point and say, oh, a change can happen here. It's the fact that Jeff McNeil hasn't been as good as he was last year. Francisco Lindor, same thing. Obviously, Marte. Even at times, as incredible as Pete Alonso has been this season, he has gone hot and cold a little bit. And look, it's totally acceptable when you have the numbers that Pete has. But I still don't think we've seen, the best version of Pete Alonso for, a 4-week stretch in a row where he's just consistent series over series. There's still been times where there's been some lulls. Say the same thing about Brandon Nimmo. The overall numbers are there, but he also has gone through a lot of peaks and valleys where you just want them to be maybe a little more consistent across the board. And once those veterans play to the back of their baseball card like they're supposed to, that's when this team's going to take off. You still have 100 games to do it, a little over 100. So it's not time to give up on the Mets after one sweep, but it's definitely a gut punch of a series considering the highs you just experienced against that Phillies team. But we'll see if they can kind of shock us on Tuesday, get back on track. I do want to mention one rookie, though, and that's Brett Baty. It's been a little bit rough for him, and I want to dive into those numbers lately in just a minute. Before we do, though, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk things through. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp by visiting betterhelp.com/lockedonmlb to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonmlb. Now, I have yet to really criticize any of these rookies up to this point because it's a learning curve, right? It's tough to come in, face MLB pitching for the first time, and it is a growing process. Brett Baty has played 50 games in his big league career. Okay. Give him another 50. I'm sure he is going to be way more comfortable in the box. He's going to have a better approach to MLB pitching. He's going to be more comfortable playing in big league ballparks, and he's going to put up better numbers. But it is fair to be concerned with what he's done lately and what he's done this season with the Mets, because he was brought in to be an impact guy, and he's the starting third baseman. I don't think that changes. You got to let him play himself out of it. But he's hitting 227 right now, 301 on base, 367 slug. His OPS is 668. You want a lot more from Brett Baty. You do. And look, he's playing a great defensive third base, so you have to give him that. And he hits the ball hard still. I imagine he's going to come around and come around soon. But when you look at his last 24 at-bats, right, over the last 7 games he's played, he's hitting 167, 231 on base, 250 slug, no home runs. But here's the big thing. 10 strikeouts to 2 walks in 24 at-bats, 26 plate appearances. That's pretty ugly. That he's not seeing the ball and he's getting exposed that much. And you look at this series against Toronto, the 2 games that he had, you had, Friday night, he goes 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. In the game, the Mets get shut out. Saturday, he goes 0 for 3 with a walk and 3 strikeouts. And the funny thing, too, is they bench him against the lefty, which I understand they're going to do that. And it's not like, he's kind of played himself into an everyday role at the moment. Like, you can understand giving him a breather at times. The funny thing, though, is he's hit better against lefties this year for whatever reason. His OPS against lefties is 796 and 635 against righties. Maybe they should have flipped that up a little bit. I don't know. Maybe they should have played him against the lefty and give him an off day in one of those other 2 games. Buck Showalter's always going to lean so heavily on righty, lefty, but you do have to look at some of the numbers behind it. I mean, it's interesting that he's hitting lefties so much better in the big league level. I don't think that's going to hold up. I mean, he's going to hit right-handed pitching, but it's been a really just tough stretch for him, and it's getting hard to watch. I mean, especially this weekend. I mean, 6 strikeouts in your 8 plate appearances with just a walk, and you go over. He's got to do a little bit of soul searching. But hey, look, you got a day off. Go into Atlanta. Maybe he finds something. Sometimes too, I feel like with rookies, when they're struggling, when they're going right, you want them at home. When they're struggling, it's almost better to get on the road, because maybe there's a little less pressure instead of, oh man, here I am trying to win this home crowd over, and I'm dropping the ball. So we'll see. We'll see if he can turn this around soon. But it had gotten to the point where I had to at least mention it because he just has not been swinging a good bat. So tomorrow's show, previewing Mets versus Braves for all you everydayers. So make sure you check that out. Make sure you follow, rate, review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. And to catch every pitch of the next Mets game, hear the hometown broadcast, you can do so with Sirius XM with the SXM app. Just search Mets.